Queen Hatshepsut, the ablest queen of far antiquity, from 1650 BC. Hatshepsut of ancient Egypt was the greatest female ruler of all time, according to some Egyptologists. Among those whom she dominated was her brother, Thutmose III, the Napoleon of far antiquity. She is also said to have been the first woman in history to challenge the supremacy of the male, though arrayed against her were more than 3,000 years of masculine tradition. There was no word for queen or empress in the language of her day, but she fought her way to power and held the throne of the world's then leading empire for 33 years. Hatshepsut lived 150 years before Tutankhamun, or 3,500 years ago. Her father, Thutmose I, was the conqueror of the known world, and when he was stricken with paralysis, Hatshepsut became his chief aide. So efficient did she prove that Thutmose in time entrusted her with the management of the kingdom and made her co-ruler. When Thutmose called the nobles together, he said to them, "This daughter, Kumit Amen Hatshepsutu, the loving one, I put in my place. Henceforth she shall guide you. Listen to her words and submit unanimously to her commands. Whoever adores her, I will adore, but he who speaks evil against her majesty will die." Hatshepsut, together, father and daughter, traveled over the empire, receiving homage, offering sacrifice in the temples, erecting monuments and buildings, improving industry and agriculture. But Hatshepsut had several rivals, principally the two sons of Thutmose, one of whom, later Thutmose II, was born of a wife not of royal birth, and was a minor. The other, later Thutmose III, was the son of a slave named Asnut. Thutmose III, hoping to oust Hatshepsut, staged a trick in the Temple of Amen to demonstrate that it was he, not she, who was the elect of God. Whilst he was at prayer one day in a secluded part of the temple, he had a priestly procession which bore a glittering image of the supreme god, Amen-Ra, swerve suddenly into the main aisle, as if drawn by some unseen power, and come toward him, whereupon he fell prostrate to the ground, as if in a trance. It was then the priests declared that the god himself stepped out of his shrine, raised Thutmose to his feet, conducted him to the innermost altar where only the Pharaoh could tread, and bade him rule over Egypt. This plot was extremely effective, and Hatshepsut was faced with the alternatives of war or compromise with Thutmose. She ended by marrying him. The two now put their father off the throne, but the old lion reasserted himself, drove them both out, and made Thutmose II, the real heir, ruler. The latter, however, was by all accounts a weakling, and died, it is believed, by assassination. At this period much of the record is lost, and there is a gap in the story of Hatshepsut. When we next hear of her, she is again on the throne with Thutmose III, who is now so strong that he is able to restrict her to the position of chief royal wife. However, by skillful intrigues, she not only restores herself as co-ruler, but finally thrusts him into the background as a mere husband, who is inferior to her prime minister, Nehusi, which name in Egyptian means full-blooded Negro. Hatshepsut had yet another handicap besides that of sex, namely ancestry. On her father's side, she was not of pure Theban stock, though her mother was. Her enemies, the priests of Amen, now seized on this taint in her lineage and plotted to dethrone her. To offset this, she began to publicize herself in the most sensational manner of that time, by the building of temples, pyramids, and obelisks, the size and grandeur of which were regarded by the popular mind as a gauge of the ruler's power. Accordingly, Hatshepsut decided to build a temple the like of which the world had never seen, and sent for her chief architect, Senmut, who to all appearances was a full-blooded Negro. Together they chose a site which was not only appropriate, but strategic. This was on an elevation 3 miles away from the stronghold of her opponents, the Temple of Amen-Ra. From this site her temple looked down on theirs. Under Senmut's genius, Hatshepsut's temple developed into what is still one of the world's most remarkable specimens of architecture. It had a frontage of 800 feet, and was for the most part hollowed out of the great cliff that overlooked it. Double and triple rows of columns lined the entrance, and the approach was marked by innumerable statues, wonderful terraces, and paradisical gardens. Colorful inscriptions decorated the interior, which abounded in architectural novelties. Not content with this, Hatshepsut decided to canny her triumph into the very camp of her detractors. She ordered to be made 2 obelisks, taller than any others in Egypt. Each was hewn from mighty blocks of rose granite, and when completed took 2 great rafts, each manned by 900 men, to transport down the Nile. Hatshepsut intended these as a gift to the temple of Amun-Ra, but very astutely she had ordered them made so tall that they were higher than the temple, whose ruins, now known as Karnak, reveal it to be one of the most colossal structures made by man. Accordingly, to make the obelisks fit, the roof of the temple was opened, and from this Hatshepsut's obelisks reared their heads as chimneys over a roof. But that was not all. To make the obelisks still more conspicuous, she had their tops encased in electrum, a metal costlier than gold. Electrum was a composition of silver and gold. Silver being rarer than gold in ancient Egypt, it was more precious. In the bright sunlight of that rainless land, the obelisks shone like glittering peaks. Their brilliancy, in the queen's own words, lit up the 2 lands of Egypt. Whenever a resident of Thebes or a visitor looked out on the city, the most dazzling sight he saw was no longer the temple of Amun-Ra, but her obelisks. When the people entered the temple, they read on them this engraving: O ye people, who shall see my monument in the ages to come, beware of saying, I know not why this was made, and a mountain fashioned entirely from gold. These 2 obelisks my majesty hath wrought that my name may abide, enduring in this temple forever and ever. The queen's popularity increased, and she became firmly established. Great prosperity came to the land, and gold was so plentiful it was no longer weighed, but was measured in bushel baskets. She wrote in her own praise, It came to pass that her majesty was increased above all things, was beautiful to look at above all things. Her voice was that of a god, her frame was that of a god, her spirit was like a god. It came to pass that she was a beautiful maiden. But in spite of all this, she was still a woman with masculine prejudice against her. To overcome it, she boldly announced that she was really a man. Whether Egypt was startled we do not know, but this step crushed all further opposition. She donned male garb, changed her name from Hatshepsitu to Hatshepsut, its male equivalent, and announced that she was of virgin birth. Her father, she declared, was not Thutmose I, but the great god Amun himself. The latter had appeared to her mother in a flood of light and perfume. The whole 7-story, in its most intimate bedroom details, was painted on the walls of her temple, and may still be seen. The child shown as being born of this union is a boy. Thereafter her sculptured portraits showed her with a man's chest and beard. She also took the title King of the North and South, Kam-Mara, the Horus of gold, bestower of years, conqueror of all lands, vivifier of hearts, chief spouse of Amun, the mighty one. But the feminine in her cropped up when she wrote of herself. His Majesty herself put with her own hands oil of Ani on all her limbs. Her fragrance was like a divine breath. Her scent reached as far as the land of Punt. Her skin is that of pure gold. It shines like the stars in the hall of festival in view of the whole land. She has no equal among the gods who were before, since the world was. She is living Ra, eternally. He hath selected her for protecting Egypt, for rousing bravery among men. I rule over this land like the son of Isis. I am mighty like the son of Nu. I shall be forever like the stars which changeth not. Hatshepsut sent expeditions to distant lands, one of which, to Punt, merits special attention. Punt was the traditional home of the earliest Egyptians and was located somewhere in East Africa. The mission was entrusted to her three favorites. Nahusi, the unmixed Negro, who is spoken of in her inscriptions as Prince Chancellor, First Friend, wearing the collar. Seniot, the architect, who is depicted as holding the queen's infant daughter, Neferuara, on his knees, and Thuti, her treasurer. They left with 5 vessels of about 300 tons each, and returned with gold, myrrh, incense, incense-bearing trees, strange animals, and other products of that region. The full story of this expedition may be read on the walls of her temple at Deir el-Bahri. In the 15th year of her reign and the 30th of her rule, she held a jubilee. Her husband, Thutmose III, was permitted to burn a little incense to Amun-Ra as he joined the procession. She wrote triumphantly, "I have no enemy in all the land. All countries are my subjects. He, Amun-Ra, hath made my boundaries to the extremities of heaven. The circuit of the sun hath labored for me." At last she died, her end hastened, perhaps, by Thutmose III. Succeeding to the throne, he killed off her friends, defaced her inscriptions, chipped her features from her portraits, and walled in her obelisks, doing all with such thoroughness that she was forgotten for 300 years. In 1906, however, an American excavator, Theodore Davis, discovered her tomb and amazed the world with the story of this remarkable woman, a worthy predecessor of Elizabeth, Joan of Arc, and Catherine the Great. Hatshepsut's grandmother, Nefertari Ames, was Ethiopian, and is shown in her portraits as being very black. In addition, Hatshepsut was of southern Egyptian ancestry, which was and still is very much mixed with the pure Negroes of the Sudan, whose territory adjoined Egypt. Of Hatshepsut and her temple, Robert Hickens says, "To me most feminine she seemed when I saw her temple at Deir el-Bahri with its brightness and its suavity, pretty shallowness and sunshine, its white and blue and yellow, and red and green and orange, all very trim and fanciful, all very smart and delicate. Full of finesse and laughter, breathing out to me of the 20th century, the coquetry of a woman in 1500 B.C. After the terrific masculinity of Medinet Abu, after the great freedom of the Ramesseum and the grandeur of its colossus, the manhood of the ages concentrated in granite, the temple of Deir el-Bahri came upon me like a delicate woman, perfumed and arranged, clothed in a creation of white and blue and orange, standing ever so knowingly against a background of orange and pink, of red and brown, a smiling coquette of the mountains, a gay and sweet enchantress who knew her pretty powers and meant to exercise them. A radiant queen reigns here, a queen of fantasy and splendor and of that divine shallowness, refined frivolity, literally cut into a mountain. Instead of being uplifted or overawed by form, we are rejoiced by color, by the high vivacity of arrested movement, by the story that color and movement tell, and over all there is a bright blue-painted sky, studded, almost distractedly studded, with a plethora of the yellow stars of the Egyptians made like starfish. Through this most characteristic temple one roves in a gaily attentive mood, feeling all the time Hatshepsut's fascination. One thing seems certain: Hatshepsut held her own until the last. Her tomb was discovered in the Valley of the Kings, where only the lordly males were buried. The queens had a burial place of their own. Hatshepsut's dearest wish was to live in the memory of mankind. To the Egyptian, that was true immortality. And she has achieved this, for graven in imperishable granite, her story is as fresh and fascinating now as when it was written 35 centuries ago.